Anna Prodromou is a consultant, researcher, and trainer on communications and diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace. Anna is currently pursuing a PhD in human-computer interaction at the Faculty of Pure and Applied Sciences, OUC. She is the founder of Anna Prodromou Inc. and president of the WICZ Foundation, a non-for-profit organization focusing on human rights. She leads the Cyprus chapter of the Culture First community and created the Wikimedia community user group Cyprus. Recognized for her achievements, Anna was awarded the 12th Cyprus's Businesswoman of the Year in 2018 and the Forbes magazine Cyprus Women in Tech Award in 2023. She is an author with her first book titled Women in Conflict Zones, which was published in 2019 by Urker Media and Publishing House. Anna, welcome to the Future Makers podcast.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
Of course, there's so many areas I want to get into, but before we kind of go into what you are doing today, I want to travel back a little. So Kierkegaard says we live life forwards, but we understand it backwards. Looking at your early years, what do you understand now about what you were learning in those early years?
Mm-hmm. I would say two things. The one starts from if we're talking about characteristics, I would say that some things are in our DNA, and I think curiosity is one of inscripted in my DNA very strongly. So I think curiosity helped me, to really have my antennas open and really see what was happening around me. One other thing that I really liked is communication. I used to like people, seeing how people communicate with each other. I really liked stories, that the people around me were telling. So I always pay a lot of attention to people, the way they communicate, but also whose words matter and whose doesn't. So I think that because very evident from very early in my life, I think every little thing that happened just led me towards this direction that I am today.
Okay, and so you said, tell me about that early environment that you were growing up in. You grew up in Cyprus, am I correct?
I was born in Cyprus before the war. Just 3 years before the war. So, but I'm saying it because, I haven't experienced the island as a whole, although I am a pre-war child. So as I was growing up, I started realizing that I live in a small island, right? Mm-hmm. We are a very small island. And also that small place was becoming even smaller because of the division, right? Mm-hmm. So things were getting, I very early, I was feeling a bit that there were a lot of boundaries. And those were boundaries, not only political boundaries or geographical, we say, but also came from the culture that was on the island. Of course, a culture that was more conservative and more troubled, I would say, because as a consequence of the war. So I think all of these things in Cyprus, really always made me looking to the future like a breaking out.
Yeah. You were quite young when the war broke out, and I guess you lived through all the very, very difficult years of, especially like post-war. What did it mean to be a woman during those times? And what were you learning what womanhood was, especially as a young child and then as a teenager?
I have to clarify that I am not a refugee, so that changes a lot the experiences, right? And while you were asking the question, I was more thinking of the things that I didn't know of what a woman was in that era. And let me explain. I grew up, war was happening, but, very quickly we picked up, and we went into some kind of normality, especially if you didn't have to move houses. So I think I went back after 5 years into some kind of normality, because in the beginning we have the people, displaced people with in the tents, living in the neighborhood, there were, a lot of efforts to support them. So, but then slowly after 5, 7 years, that calmed down. What I found after, as an adult, as an older woman, was that I knew nothing about the women of that era. Because in my mind, the only thing I knew about those women were the women standing at the barricades with their black, dress black, and with their pictures of their missing sons, husbands. And it was always that figure of a woman weeping. The woman that has been either violated or hurt or missing something. And that was the main image that I have as a child. But then I realized, after I started reading, that was not the only women that were around us. There were the women that they did marches for the island. There are women that fought for going back, and there are so many powerful women, but that history never spoke about them. So it is a bit confusing for me to say what my idea of what a woman was when I was growing, because it was just the figures of the people that were taking care of me, my mom, my aunts, and I had no clue about that other side of these strong women, that they were really up the front and fighting for social justice or for anything else.
Yeah. I kind of want to give you this space right now to talk a little bit about your book and what led to you wanting to, share what women were actually doing during these
When
times.
I started thinking about this, I was thinking, I had this thing back in my head that I want to do something with women. I had no clue what that would be. I just thought that if I get the opportunity, I will do something about women. So then a friend of mine told me about this, an EU funding opportunity. And then I said, this is it. So I started writing the proposal. And that's how the Women in Conflict Zones started as a project that led later on to a book. So my initial thought was with women, and all of those things that I told you, from reading about the history of women and seeing how invisible they were in Cyprus and in the history of Cyprus, that's how I started, thinking that I want to give visibility to women, and I want us to discuss about identity, like what it means to be a woman in Cyprus, even before or after the war. And what it means to be a woman now in Cyprus. So we talk about identity, ethnicity, a lot of things. That was a very powerful experience for me, and obviously it became stronger when it went further than any small EU project. So the project was the interviews, and every interview, because I interview women coming from all communities of Cyprus. So I had Greek Cypriot women, Turkish Cypriot women from the Latin community, Armenian and Maronite. And that's another thing also, that we don't really we always focus on bicommunality, and because of this divide with Turkish Cypriots and Greek Cypriots, but there's so many other communities in Cyprus. So I wanted to share the light towards a women's story, and that led to what I was going to say is that every interview was accompanied by a black and white picture. So we present the interviews, and we had exhibitions across the island of the photographs. And later on, people were coming to me and saying, Anna, this was very good to leave it as just an EU project. And because I am not a big fan also of EU projects that die right after their completion, I was thinking how this can, be sustainable. So I turned it first into a book. And now, as you read, that is the WICZ Foundation. The WICZ Foundation, the initials that you said, WICZ, are the initials of Women in Conflict Zones. And I added plus because I want to go beyond women's rights. Anyway, women's rights are under human rights. So we are dealing more with any community that it's on the margins. So that's how the book started, and it led to the foundation.
I want to still go back to you yourself, of course, but you've kind of touched something that I really, really want to dive into right now, is you went from the stories of women, you were interviewing, you were giving this space for women to share their own personal narrative, because in your own words, there isn't as much visibility about their experience. and then you kind of connect it to human rights and, you know, feeling more empowered within society. What connects it to giving, you know, being able to share your story and then a more political front where human rights come in?
Now you said something, and I cannot let it go. You used the word empowerment, which is a word that I don't really like because we use it a lot about women.
Very much.
And every time I am in front of an audience and someone says the word empower, I'm saying, how many women in this room are not empowered? You know, and no woman, you know, unless it's a young women, you know, in their 20s or maybe a late 20s, they will say, you know, that they still haven't found, you know, who they are. Yes, and feel empowered. Any other woman feels empowered. So basically, we don't need empowerment, I think, and I'm going to sound a bit controversial, but I think when we talk about empowerment, I think we need to empower men more in order to be more accepting to their sensitive side, you know, and really understand and really be allies to women. I think that's most. I think this is empowerment needs to shift the focus from women. So that, and you asked me about how from women's rights I went to human rights.
Yeah.
I think all of my life, this is one of the very personal interviews that I'm doing, I have to admit. Usually I just talk about my work without talking a lot about myself. I think that from a very early age, because of my experiences of you know, not very positive experiences in the house, you know, living with a family that had a different kind of problems. I think that made me a bit more empathetic, a bit more open to really listening in and being more attentive to what was happening around me. So there was a sensibility with that. So of course, the fact that I am a woman, you know, led to have a more stronger interest towards women's rights. But slowly I realized that I'm more a humanist, you know, and I'm more interested, you know, as seeing everybody as humans, you know, and accepting them for who they are, despite their any other identities. You know, identities in the end they just put us in boxes. So I think that's what led to have a more, you know, widen my perspective towards human rights and leave the specificity of women's rights.
I mean, you already mentioned, like, you had your mother, your aunties in your life as, you know, models close to you. What about the men? Who were the men? I feel like I should actually also give you an opportunity to highlight the men that were in your life at that time.
And let me clarify first that I don't feel that my mom and my aunts, the women in my environment, worked as role models. I think, and most of them are alive, so I hope they don't get offended with what I say, but I feel that I wanted to be totally different from them because they were... and I'm talking from my personal experience, they were more the obedient, the housewives, you know, and all these things that had a negative connotation. As I grow older now, I'm feeling that there's a lot of value in what they were offering. I'm not as dismissive as I was when I was younger, but for me, it was always something that I didn't want to be. Do you understand what So they didn't really work as role models. They worked more as, as
models of
to avoidance. Yeah. And it's not personal. It's just that's how the way things were for, I think, the majority of the families in Cyprus. You know, it was a patriarchal situation, and that leads me to men in my life. A bit puzzled. I could feel the unfairness. I could never understand why just the fact that someone is a man can come back from work and sit down. And my mother, who was a housewife, but then she had to go and work. She had to come back from the house and she had to continue doing the second shift of the home. So in the very very small environment of my own family, I saw these injustices that they could not be justified other than by the sex of the person. And I experienced the same thing with the fact that I have an older sister and an older brother. So when we started being teenagers, and we have quite a small gap between us, like 3 years from my brother, who is the eldest. And my brother was treated totally different than us as girls. He was allowed to go to places. He was allowed to, stay longer at night. We were not allowed it unless he was with us. So it's these small things as you're growing up that made me feel a bit, curious about the roles, but a bit not negative towards men, but I felt that it was unfair what was happening towards us women. And I think that really fed my passion for human rights and for equality.
Were you seeing any other examples to compare, what you were seeing in the home environment and what you were craving for? Because you're hinting at this like rebellious spirit. I'm just wondering where it was coming from. Did you must have been craving some other form of womanhood or identity, but where was that craving coming from?
I think it was something deeply ingrained in me. I think I felt that what the society, let's say, the family, right, as a small society, expected from me was not who I was. I felt that I had to shrink myself in order to fit in their expectations, either the families or the communities or the societies in general. I don't know, it was just a feeling inside of me that the only moments that I was accepted was the moments that I was silent and I wasn't really expressing what I really wanted to express. I don't know if that makes sense.
It makes complete sense. Where did you go? Moving out of the home? You went straight into marriage, or where did you?
Okay, so we're going back again.
We're going back again. We're going doing a little back and forth.
I lived for quite a few years in Athens after finishing high school and everything. And then I came back in Cyprus. And yes, quite soon I entered into a relationship that led to marriage. So although I was a bit of a rebellion, then when I came back, there was not a lot of options for me of not abiding by the rules of society. So the very idea that I was having a relationship, that meant for my family that it should lead somewhere. So it led to a marriage.
Another point that I want to mention is that you're currently studying for a PhD. How did your educational career start, and what was the reaction of your, immediate family to you wanting to pursue an education and such a serious, path into education? I mean, PhD is not very common, around the world, especially, but one in a STEM subject, very not as frequently chosen by women.
I think that I am 53. I'm going to turn 54 this June. So because I started my PhD like 2 years ago, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So I don't think at that age or at this age that I'm now, the ideas or the assumptions or everything of other people play such a crucial role as it used to play. So for my PhD, because I did two attentions that were not successful on doing PhD in the last 10 years. So the first time I was, if I remember correctly, I wrote like the 1-2 pager and at the night before I didn't send it. And then something else happened, I don't remember, and I didn't do it. And so now it was just things came to me, and I felt that it was the time to do it. And actually, it's an interesting story because I was doing my master's degree in Open University of Cyprus on communication and journalism. And one of my professors is Jana Otterbacher, which I admire a lot. She's amazing. She later on, we stayed in contact and we collaborated as a communication professional through some projects that she was running at the Open University of Cyprus. So actually, she had just she was just starting the Center for Algorithmic Transparency, and I was called in to support them in communicating what algorithms are, these ideas to the public, and help them with the opening launch and throughout I think it was 4 years that this project, it still continues, but I mean, while it was a Horizon project. So I started reading about these things, and I felt, because always I was feeling that I'm going to do something with gender, I'm going to do something with human rights. And then when I started reading about, artificial intelligence and how, the algorithms are really basically perpetuating the same inequalities that we experienced in the past. So to me, it was like the two things merging together. So I felt very passionate about it. I wanted to read more. And then, yes, it was a huge decision. I'm not going to say it was an easy decision, but it was more a decision from my part that there were some things that needed to be sacrificed in order to do that.
You write a lot about how important language is, especially when it comes to work around like transparency and biases. Can you talk a little bit about the controversies, I guess, around words used, the language used, and where the biases come in there?
Some simple examples. Basically, languages carry ideologies, right? And of course, depending on the language that you're talking, different ideologies run through the stream while we're talking. So it's a very powerful tool. It's a very powerful tool that you can use for good. You can use it to make people feel included, or you can not purposefully put people on the margins, but a lot of times we do. Some examples are like the language we use to characterize women and the different adjectives, let's say, to characterize men. So we talk more about emotional, gentle, all this, and then we talk about leadership and strong. I mean, we had the example about empowerment that is associated with a necessity or something that is absent in women, although that's not the case. And I'm sure that some of the people that are listening to us or watching us, they would think that what I said about men, it was sounded a bit diminishing, but it's not, because the words have arbitrary meaning. We give them meaning. So I think it's about time, first of all, to reclaim language and some terms that have been used with a negative connotation to give them the actual normal connotation that they should have. And also the way, now we're talking in English, and in English, because we don't have the genders, it's not, the differences are not so obvious. But in Greek language, and that's why I run inclusive language workshops as well, because we have the genders, masculine, feminine, and neutral. So that creates a bit of a difference, because a division, because we use he in to describe anything that has to do with either with women or with anything else. And I was reading the other day something that a woman that said that she tried to change the way she was talking to her students by small things like using humankind or like for jobs like a fire person rather than a fireman. There are simple things. Or when you address people, instead of saying, hey guys, and I know that it doesn't mean we talk to everybody, but still we're saying guys. We can say, hey people, hey all. There are so many other alternatives that make people feel more included. But also language is very crucial in the professional environment. Let's think of how a vacancy advertisement is being written. Sometimes it's written in language or the wording that's used. Many times it's written like that it's towards men, a lot of times. But even if it's not so obvious that it's written towards men, even the words they are using, they are more prone to a man thinking that he will be able to deliver that rather than a woman. Okay, so I think language is a very important tool that we don't need to change everything, and we're not doing it for political correctness because I hear a lot about that it's a part of an agenda or we are sacrificing things on. No, it's about being aware of my audience, to who I'm talking to. I cannot be standing in a crowd of women and saying, hello, guys. Or in Greek, which like I hear it so often, the word president, and instead of saying I proedros, and I mean saying that it's a female, they're even, seeing a woman in front of them and they're using the masculine. Yeah. And you cannot, I have a lot of examples that I'm using in my workshops about governmental instructions or a lot of things that in the government that are written are strictly on using the masculine, even if when they are referring to women.
What was the reception to your workshops? I mean now in general, I guess over the last few years. And what do you think that tells us about the culture we're in? Do you think Cyprus is ready for inclusive language, or is there still some resistance?
There's still resistance, obviously, and I can see the change in the sense that I'm not naive, although to feel that the change is because there is some genuine interest in these subjects. There is, but it's the minority of the organizations that have a genuine interest. A lot of times it comes from as a necessity because the EU legislations, are reinforcing this thing. But I think as soon as I step into an organization, I always leave so fulfilled at the end of the workshop that no matter the resistance I get, even that resistance comes from a place of like a thirst to know about these things. I really experienced that a lot. I have a lot, and I had this specific example that happened to me quite a few times. The people that are more resistant during the sessions, then during the intervals or at the end, they are the person that come to me and say, I was a bit, I sounded a bit aggressive, or I was a bit bad, because I experienced this in my life, or because I really have this in my family and I don't know how to handle it. It comes from a place of, uncomfortableness or exploration. And I think in Cyprus, we still don't talk about a lot of things in the open. We don't talk about female sexuality a lot. We don't talk about even the LGBTQ plus community are still, fighting for some basic rights. We don't talk about these things. So the people have a thirst for these conversations. So even when I get resistance, I know that it helped them starting to explore something that they always wanted to explore, but they were not really ready to do it.
So one of the articles I read that was written by you was about like the expectations on genders and the kind of language environments or the language that they are, I guess, not only just expected, but I think expected is the right word here, expected to use, especially in certain contexts. I want to ask first, do you think there is still the certain expectations on the kind of languages men and women should be using? And then I guess my second part to the question is, have you noticed any of your own kind of language changing over the years? And where do you think that change stemmed from?
Okay. Now you reminded me that my thesis for my communication and journalism master's degree was in power dynamics in language. So I was examining, if I remember correctly, because it's been a long time, the Washington Post and the New York Times, because I was in the States close to the end of my master's, and to Vima and Kathimerini, to Greek. And actually at that time, we weren't really with... we had Facebook, but not really this, abundance of social media and stuff like that. So people were still commenting on the news articles, on the newspapers. So I was examining the comments and I was researching the language that was used by men and by women when they were commenting on this. So you see, it's very much related and of course, the results show that there's a different way that women, first of all, the women didn't participate as much, and we know why, because, a lot of the everyday life burden is on them. So the majority of participants, commenters, let's say, were men. But women had a different way of expressing themselves than men. Men were more aggressive, and of course they were more aggressive towards women. Also, another thing that was very interesting to me was that women were adopting the style. If they had an answer in their comment, they were kind of adopting the style of the person who wrote to them. If the person was a bit more aggressive, they might go that way, or they were following a bit the pattern of their interlocutor. That's my French coming in. I don't know how it is in English. Okay, so yes, definitely, those maybe are findings that happened 10 years ago, and now, of course, some progress have been made, but still. We women are expected, and I'm going to talk especially for Cyprus, that we are expected to. We're not expected to swear, right, in an everyday life. We're expected, to use more calm language and languages that it's not very argumentative, And on the contrary, if men are doing that, they seem to their peers that they are soft and that's a negative for them. And I don't even remember the question that you asked me, but something that is related to this, but you will remind me, is I need to say that this situation is not helping men or women, okay? So when I'm talking about gender in a lot of my workshops, I don't talk about women. Yeah. Today we focus more about women because I am speaking from my experience as a woman. But whenever I talk about gender, we talk about both men and women. Okay, and I'm not going to go into the expanding of genders. Now we're going to say it like that, and how those genders, what are the expectations of these genders by society. So this situation is not helping anybody. I mean, there are a lot of men that are suffering because it's not. This macho-ness and aggressiveness doesn't come by nature in them. It's something that is enforced in them as well. So I think just letting go of these, expectations by the society will only help everybody, no matter what gender. So please remind me the question about language, if I haven't answered it.
Yeah, I was just going to ask how your own language use. Have you noticed any changes in how you are using language today to how you were using it in the past?
Yeah, I think now a lot of things. Yes, the simple answer is yes. I speak more differently, openly now that I used to speak. Okay, but that what helps with that is that I work for myself, Of course, when I go into an organization, the organization trusts me, and that's why they brought me there. But I always trust, I always have, I feel that they have faith that that's why they brought me into the organization, to have those hard conversations, to be able to be more outspoken and use words that usually you wouldn't hear in organizational setting. Basically, when I start my workshop, especially for diversity, equity, and inclusion, I think the second or third slide is that you're going to feel uncomfortable. If you don't feel uncomfortable, it means that you're not paying attention. And we are going to use language that is inappropriate, because what is inappropriate language? Other terms are inappropriate for some people, others for others. But even if it is inappropriate, if we're using it just to convey the message and we speak the truth and not, mask it behind, a more acceptant term, then that's okay. So I always start, that we are going to use any language that comes naturally to us, as long as we're doing it from a place that we really want to get the message out there and be understood.
Let's turn the conversation more to AI. You write a lot about how AI is not just reflecting already existing stereotypes and biases, but it's also scaling it at speed that we've never really seen before. Can you comment on that?
Yes, I only write for the time being about AI, other than my thesis, that I'm working on. I'm only writing as a person with curiosity and openness. I don't write yet as an academic, or
it's just from a bigger personal.
Yes, no, I'm just saying because I give a lot of importance to journals and articles that are really going in depth and have the academic background. I don't have it yet, so yes, they are scaling it, because if we think that. Let's take an example. I always like to speak with examples, especially when it comes to AI. So before we see an advertisement for a vacancy, we go and we have, let's say, one person opposite us, doing the interview, or maybe a committee of 3 people, right? Somewhere around there, maximum 5 people. So you get from 1 to 5 different views of who you are by those people, right? Now, our CVs go through an algorithmic tool that calculates, every single word that we use, the way we used it, or even where we live, everything, and all those biases and stereotypes or assumptions that are already ingrained by millions of people are ingrained there. So, and especially I talk about this for why we should go away from trying to find people to fit our culture, because that's where the problem starts also with AI, because if the AI tool is trained of who is already in the organization, right, and the organization is not really in a level that is fully diversified and and equal, then that's exactly what the AI is going to do. It's going to think that if we have more women in this organization, so women is going to be a best fit for this organization, or there were a lot of instances of AI tools of rejecting people from specific addresses. That was not in Cyprus, like in the US, when you were putting your address and your prefix, that was in US and in the UK, because they thought that you live too far from there. So they were they were concentrated on specific postal codes. So all the other CVs were being rejected, not taking into consideration that maybe you wanted to move into that city. Maybe now you're living somewhere else, that's your permanent address, but if you get that job, you're willing to move, you're really willing to make a change. But the algorithm cannot see that. They just see a specific, pattern of instructions, and they try to make assumptions and the better match. So yeah, it's very important because those tools are used by millions of people and they evaluate millions of people. And saying evaluation, the same goes for the evaluation tools. There's so many aspects that, another, when it comes to health, there are tools that are used to evaluating who needs more, not more care, more sooner care than somebody else, and the algorithm now decides that. And so how does it measure that? Sometimes it measures it just by the color of your skin. Yeah, unfortunately. So there are a lot of things. I am not a Luddite against technology. I think it's the only way forward. So I don't want to sound that doom is going to come by AI. No, but we need transparency. AI tools shouldn't be working as black boxes. Yeah. We need to know what's going in. We need transparency, and definitely we need accountability.
You mentioned the word editing, and I find that really interesting because...
The word?
Editing.
Mm-hmm.
Because yes, editing language, editing, our physical appearance, editing even like our identities online. What do you think is behind this editing? Is it this need for control? Is it this need to fill maybe... Because we know we were going through a loneliness epidemic. Is this need to curate a life where you don't feel that loneliness within you? And I'm talking not only, just in general, but specifically for the generation that is now growing up in mostly an online environment. What is it about this editing that they feel they need?
I think it's conformity. It's the need for acceptance, and it's okay up to... No, it's not okay. It's normal when you are in your teenage years to want to be accepted. And it's a natural process of finding yourself to be able to... it's a natural process of finding yourself to find it through comparison with other people, and you try to fit into places, right? That's the time that you're experimenting, So fitting is not as bad when it's at that young age. Of course, when it's when you're not losing yourself in it. So up to a point, that's okay. I couldn't say, because conformity has a negative connotation. So up to that phase of your life, you just want to be accepted. You want to be a part of the group, You want to belong and participate in the party that's happening around you. But I think the problem is that what we are feeding these young people. And what do we see online now? On the one spectrum, we see misogyny in young men. There's a big outburst of young men talking about, how to... basically trying to be influencers to other men, or how to live their life as, real men can, but actually it's just, hidden misogyny behind all those narratives. And on the other side, we have young girls that are just concentrate on their appearance with all this get dressed with me, and I have boys, so I'm not experiencing it with girls, but a lot of my friends are saying that, they're young girls now, they are they're doing so many things. Even the preparation to go to school was nothing like just washing our face like it used to be in my generation. And the best case scenario was you had a good hair day.
Because you don't have time to brush your hair because you're 5 minutes away from the bell.
Exactly. But now it's totally different. A lot of young women are, I would say, spending a lot of time in their day, just waking up earlier to prepare so that they feel that what they present to the world is going to be accepted, So I think it's a bit hard. Again, this is where we should be coming as, regulating these tools of who can use them, because up to now there wasn't a lot of regulation, and the filters, so many, the discussion is endless on that, So there has to be some regulation on the ages, the appropriate ages, the same way that we have on TV, and we have that, sign of what age is appropriate. I think it should be not slowly, but we should, have more specific instructions of what tool can be used for what ages, and some of them should definitely be restricted.
I want to now just return to you personally. What are the values that you live by?
The values that I live by today: authenticity. I hope this came out in this podcast. I think that we cannot be anything else than ourselves, or we could be the best version of ourselves. And a lot of people that trying hard, to portray something different, at some point you can see that. So and it took me a long time to accept that, to really say that I just have to be who I am, and pick up my battles if I say something that is wrong or whatever. So authenticity is one thing. I would say truthfulness. Yeah, which is something that I didn't have, especially coming from communication. Because in communication, you beautify things. You know what I mean? So you're not very, close to the truth, as long as you're not lying. So it's like the white lies.
The gray area, yeah.
But recently, because my memory is not helping me a lot, that was an amazing, actually that is something that a very good friend of mine told me 10 years ago when I wouldn't understand it. I was just questioning him on, are you serious? Are you telling the truth now about something? And he said, no, definitely, because I don't remember things. So I am not in that space of saying lies anymore. I found that. So I didn't really believe it, but it just stick with me. And this is something that I go by now, because I feel that my memory is not helping me. That helped me in going more towards my truthfulness. So when someone asks me, can you come to this thing? I'm not going to find a white lie and say, no, because this or that. If I don't want to go, I'm just going to say, no, I'm not going to lie that I have something else. Because, and this, I make jokes with my friends, because I will not remember. Maybe you will see me after 2 weeks and you ask me, you wouldn't make it because you had that thing. And I will say, what? But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sometimes nature and the fact that my memory is deteriorating, I think it pushed me towards, like that authenticity and more clarity, or I can really tell my truth. I can really say I cannot go there, and I don't have to justify myself why I can, because we do that a lot. Every time we say no to something, we feel that we need to justify why we're not doing it. I think these two things, and curiosity has always been my thing. I think curiosity, and I think that's what led me also to the PhD, is like anything new, it just sparks an interest in me that I want to know a bit more, dive into, so I think this, I don't know if
You did.
I answered.
I just want to touch upon that aspect of no. No is such a powerful word but it's one that I know for myself I always struggle with. It's like if I say no, I feel there needs to be an apology coming after. I can't just say no and place a full stop, end it there. There needs to be something complete, storyline, fairy tale around it, and then just throw in the no and then continue with like some kind of apology. Why do you think we are still so afraid to just say no?
You know why?
Why?
Because we want to be liked. And from the moment I started to feel that I prefer to be respected than being liked, and that shifted something inside of me. So when you say no, it's not a matter of being without continuing. It's not being disrespectful. The other way around is being thinking that you are respectful to the other person, which usually you just say an excuse, right? Might not be the truth, but you're disrespectful to yourself, right? Because you're stressing at that moment to have to find something to say. But if you just say, no, I can't, or that is something that I cannot do, just leave it there. Maybe the other person will come back with more questions, and maybe that would lead to a more genuine conversation on why you don't want to do something, right? Or you don't want to participate in something. But I think that a need comes from a need to be liked and accepted. And it's a plague.
It is.
Everybody's doing it. It's not a characteristic of men and women, in my opinion. I think everybody's doing it, and it takes a lot of practice, I would say, to be able to say that.
To be able to say no.
And a lot of things in communication are a matter of practice, you know. I say that a lot when I'm doing public speaking workshops. I tell them that nothing comes naturally. Everything needs to be practiced from before, and it needs to be, you know, you need to say it again and again and practice the scenario in your own brain and then say it out loud, you know, so that the next time this happens to you, because usually what we do, something happens to us and said, I should have said that. I don't understand why I didn't speak or why I said that. So just take it as an opportunity to practice and use keywords, you know, that are going to help you to take you the next time towards the direction that you're going to make you feel better.
We're always what is it? We work in progress.
Oh, totally. Humans are a work in progress.
Learning. And hopefully taking one step forward, not too many back, but always going forward.
And that would take us back to the beginning, which we live our future.
Of course.
Going to the back. That's a bit existentialism, and I am, as a philosophy, I'm in between existentialism and humanist. But yes, that's exactly what you said.
And I think this leads us perfectly to my last question is, what is the future that you are building towards?
That's a very hard question, because we spoke about a lot of things. This is a totally new era that we're living. And I think what I'm striving for is to feel good about myself, because I think at the end of the day, everybody, I'm not going to say that it's for other people, it's for humanity. At the end of the day, it's for me. I want to feel that these new things that are happening, that I've learned a bit about it, and I advocated a bit on, and I'm talking about AI and diversity, equity, inclusion, you know, that I did my part, you know, in informing people, educating, speaking about it, you know, and trying maybe in the future, you know, like be able to have a saying in legislation, or, you know, and reinforcing, you know, the transparency, the accountability that needs to be made in order to have a future. And a future that is equal for all.
Anna, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been such a pleasure. And I know there's so many things that, gosh, I've learned already in this hour, and I hope our audience will be able to get and take home and have use as a learning step and be able to apply to their lives. So thank you so much for coming on
Thank
today.
you very much. You've been an amazing host.
Thank you.
And as I told you in the middle of our interview, this is the first time that I spoke a bit more about myself other than my work. Thank you for inviting me.
I'm